Op is disabled and has a hired helper who was supposed to cook squash for her. Couldn't find the squash, so the aide started cooking rats meant for snake consumption instead. Posted by u/cptn space case. Op made a post in r/true off my chest that was titled, "Today my aide cooked what should not be cooked." I have to get this out because today feels like an actual nightmare I keep expecting to wake up from. I'm disabled and need help with things around the house. Today was the second day with a new agency and a new home health aide, Tina. I set it up so she would come by in the morning while I was sleeping. Insomnia is brutal, and I texted her last night about what I needed done today. One of those things was roasting some pre-cut squash I'd gotten so I could have it with my salads and pasta. I was very clear in my instructions, what it looked like, where it was in the fridge, how to use the oven, how to cook it. I also have a roommate who was up and told her she could ask them for help if she couldn't find anything, or come get me if truly necessary. Now, I have 3 pet ball pythons. They eat rats that I thaw from frozen in the fridge in a reusable plastic bag. Yes, that's where I'm going with this. Tina couldn't find the squash, so obviously, that meant she should roast the first other thing she saw that was also technically encased in plastic, in a completely different area of the fridge. The effing rats, in butter and salt, in my nice baking dish. And that's insane all on its own. But if you're going to cook any animal, you should at least clean and skin it first, right? Do the crazy, disgusting thing properly so I can respect the effort, instead of just sticking them in as is, fur and guts and all. And the smell, good God, baby Jesus, the smell. It woke me up and had me gagging the moment I opened my bedroom door. Definitely not squash, or food smelling for that matter. At first, I thought the squash had spontaneously rotted overnight and she tried to cook it anyway. That would have been slightly less insane, and much preferable. I had to pull it out of her what she was cooking instead. When she said she couldn't find the squash, it was in plain sight. I had to open the oven and see my snake's dinners in place of my own. And I still couldn't process what the F was happening, what I was looking at and smelling. I don't like yelling at people and generally avoid it. Today was a day for exceptions. And at the end of my half-crazed, dissociative rant, I told her to get the whole dish, its contents, and herself out of the effing house, and to not come back. Suffice it to say, I've contacted the agency to report it and am requesting a new aide. Now I'm sitting in a cafe, trying to calm down and eat something despite the scent memory that's taken up permanent residence and is turning my stomach. The whole house reeks like musty, sewage-dipped pork that had been left out for a whole day before being cooked in rancid oil, and I'm not sure Febreze is gonna cut it. I don't want to go home. Edit. Some further clarification about things people were asking in the comments. Tina spoke fluent English without an accent. She's either a native speaker or has been speaking it since she was very young. We had also spoken early that morning when she arrived, over the phone, woke me up while I was sleeping upstairs, but whatever, I'd rather have too much communication than too little, because she wanted to clarify about the squash. She specifically acknowledged the concept of squash and asked if it was near the kale she was seeing. I said that sounded right and that it should be labeled. She said okay. I reminded her that if she couldn't find it, she should ask my roommate for help. The rats were on the top shelf of our freezer top fridge, so you'd have to be leaning down to even see them, and no kale would be in their vicinity. 3 people live in this house, so it's always full. She didn't know I had snakes, unless she'd seen them in their bins in the living room, which is possible. It looks like a filing cabinet with clear plastic drawers, and sometimes they come to the front. They're very quiet pets and don't even count with my landlord, so sometimes I forget to mention them when people ask about pets, as they're usually asking due to allergy concerns. So when the agency asked, I was focused on our cats. They know now, of course, but Tina had no reason to think she should be preparing a pet's meal. That was never established as part of her duties when I met with her and an agency nurse the day before to go over everything. Also, snakes can't eat cooked meat, even if it's safely prepared. It would make them sick, so it couldn't still be used. Update 1 week later. Apologies for the late update. As I'm sure you can imagine, the last week was exhausting. This is just to provide what closure I can and to go over how my last conversation with Tina went, the day after the incident. When I was on my way to the cafe to escape the house last Tuesday, she actually texted me an apology, saying, "I'm so sorry, I feel so stupid and bad. This has never happened before," and offered to pay me back for the rats and the dish, as I had mentioned the rats were expensive. Which is honestly more than I was expecting, but never happened before. Well, I sure effing hope so. Though that begs the question, why now, why me? I don't know if there's a good answer. We agreed that she could come by the next evening with the money, $15 for the rats, $30 for the dish. She declined using Venmo or something similar, possibly because she didn't know how. Based on her comment about her grandson being my age, I estimated that she had to be at least in her late 60s, probably older. I admit I was hesitant to have her return to the scene of the crime when it was still so unclear what her true motivations had been, but I wouldn't be home alone, and she had seemed sincerely contrite, if a bit defensive over the degree of my outrage. Before the appointed time, she called me to say she was on her way, and then she made, of all things, a request. She would be bringing her timesheet, so could I sign for the 2 days she'd been there? I was baffled. The audacity of asking me a favor when our meeting was about her making amends, claiming that her time with me should count as doing her job, and implying that paying me back was in exchange for something from me. Maybe that was why she wanted to use cash? But at this point, I just wanted the whole thing over and done with, and it's not like I was the one who'd be paying her, just my insurance. It was also confusing because, did that mean she was still employed? Surely if she'd been fired, she'd be less willing to play nice with me, probably blaming me more for how it affected her. At the very least, she seemed like the kind of person who would bring it up to make me feel at least a little bad. But maybe she wouldn't, I don't know. It was also strange because, out of the 3, now 4, HHAs I've had at 2 different companies, none have ever asked me to sign a timesheet for them. Maybe some of you all more familiar with the inner workings of these companies can shed some light here. I was nervous when she showed up. There's something about seeing someone do something so truly unhinged that shatters the basic trust that a fellow human won't do something else crazy, maybe something more harmful than running one out of the house. So I checked her hands through the window before I opened the door. She had 2 plastic bags, half full and bundled up to hide their contents, under each arm. A strange choice for a weapon, so I chose Faith. There was no more apology upon greeting, she mostly just seemed in a hurry, civil but brusque, like she wanted this behind her as much as I did. While she was rummaging, I asked how she disposed of the dish, the follow-up to the video I made, linked in the original post if you want to see, you shickos. And as expected, the first thing she brought out was her timesheet. Sure enough, there was a place for a patient's signature, and as I took it, along with the proffered pen, and set it against the doorframe to sign, I said, just to confirm, we said $45, right? The look she gave me as she reached into her jacket was so offended, and her civility evaporated, like I was questioning her word, and how dare I? She said, I'm gonna pay you. I said I would, in a tone that was like, calm down, paranoid prick. It took all my self-control not to respond with, you also said you'd cook the squash. Like, yeah, lady, wonder why I would want to triple-check anything we agreed to at this point, my bad. But she did, in fact, hand me the wad of bills, after I'd handed back the timesheet and she checked it, and then she left in a bit of a huff. I just told her to take care of herself, to her back. At this point, after interacting with her again, I am of the opinion that this was simply some form of psychosis, either a mental health issue or senility, I don't know. Even talking to her, things were just a little off. Hard to describe, but it was like part of her attention was always somewhere else. I do not believe this was malicious or weaponized incompetence, as many were saying in the TikTok comments. She had nothing to gain from this, and clearly, she wants to keep her job. After the shock and horror have worn off, I just feel kind of bad for her. She clearly shouldn't be in this profession, which, by the way, she said she's been in for 30 years, so I blame these companies more for not being thorough in their hiring and training process. Psych evils should be par for the course, surely. And I know I probably shouldn't have, it's none of my business, but it was eating at my conscience not to express my concern. Because I don't know what's going on in her life. When it comes to things like reality breaks and changes in behavior, it can be really hard to see for ourselves, and maybe the people in her life aren't saying anything, so she's not seeking the help she needs. So I texted her a little while after she left. I thanked her for taking responsibility, acknowledged that I was butting in, and then brought up how she had said this had never happened before and how she had seemed confused about how it happened. I gently and non-judgmentally suggested that if this was a new kind of issue or if there had been other strange occurrences, it might be a good idea to talk to a doctor, just in case something else was going on that needed to be addressed. I ended with, but if I'm way off base and out of line, and you're just used to people eating like that, I apologize and wish you the best. After a day of silence, she sent 2 texts, copied here. K. Thank you. People make mistakes. God bless. Have a good day. That was, and I'm sure will remain, the last I heard from her. I'm sorry I can't recount some detailed confession about how it had all been a nefarious plot by some vengeful ex who had their aunt impersonate an aide to poison me. That would have made for a much more satisfying story. As for my current aide situation, I'm still working with the replacement they sent me but have already requested a new one. She's sane and competent, but alas, it seems she greatly exaggerated her English fluency to my coordinator, who sounded resigned to such deceit. In any other service context, I wouldn't care. We have translator apps, but I think we've seen how critical clear and easy communication can be when one person is relying on another to meet their needs while sick. Others have told me how long it can take to find a good fit, so I guess I'll just have to keep spinning the revolving door until I do. Also, I have put in a request for the agency to reimburse me for the takeout I had to get that day. The oven has been cleaned and sanitized within an inch of its life and seems okay now? I dunno, asking for a replacement or suing anyone seems like a lot of hassle, especially when I already have a medical malpractice case in the works. Thank you to everyone for taking an interest in my harrowing experience and for your support. It legitimately turned this into something more lighthearted that I can laugh at now, whereas it would have remained traumatic otherwise. May your squash always be squash. Editor's note. Op's TikTok account is at Kelsey Can Stand and has 2 videos talking about the event, including one showing the baking dish in which the rats were cooked, now in the trash.